So that way we can see you. Don't worry about being Instagram ready or any of that. We were going through our own technical difficulties before we started, but we found it, we worked it out. So we're all here together. We are recording this, so we will send out the rewatch link in just a few days, so you can find it on our YouTube channel, which you can see is at Power to Fly Chat and Learns. And another way you can participate is you can write in the chat. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat as we are going along, because this is a Q&A session. That's really the focus of this next 45, 50 minutes. If you have anything that you'd like to ask anonymously, you can DM me or Erica if you like. She is labeled as Power to Fly Chat and Learn. You can DM either of us. Just go over to the chat section, select my name, Hunter C, or the Power to Fly Chat and Learn channel there. You can message us, and then we can ask your question anonymously live here. And if you would like to ask a question in the public forum, we would love that. Please be mindful that this is a shared safe space, so please be considerate of yourselves and others as we enjoy this next hour. And you can follow Power to Fly at all the things, at Power to Fly, hashtag Power to Fly. If you're as I've been recently dubbed a geriatric millennial, you'll know that the @ is pound, the hashtag in my days, but there's this thing called a telephone that, okay, I won't get into it. Anyway, so without further ado, I'm so happy to have Dr. Mary Hemphill here today. We're gonna jump into this chat. So Dr. Mary is a leadership expert and coach, K-12 educator and administrator, author, and motivational speaker. What did you do this morning, friends? Come on, hello. She holds a PhD in leadership studies from NC A&T State University and currently teaches as an adjunct professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's also the CEO and founder of the Limitless Lady LLC, a company that helps individuals ignite the leader in themselves so they can better serve their community, company, and personal career. Sign me up for that, friends. Everyone should sign up for that. Mary has led, coached, and impacted close to 40,000 individuals around the world on transformational and innovative strategy, self-empowerment, and leadership through her Limitless Leader program, coaching, and consulting. Amazing. So if you have questions, these are the main topics that we're going to be focusing on today. The importance of grounding through the power of storytelling, the ineffectual impact of traditional leadership language and how to rebrand, and research-based protocols that create new exemplars of efficiency, trust, and empathy in the workplace. We could always use more empathy inside and outside the workplace, I think. So Dr. Mary Hemphill, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Hunter. It is a pleasure to be here and to engage with our participants today.
Yeah, so awesome. Where are you calling in from, by the way?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, right. Of course, where you teach.
Yes.
Amazing. An easy commute.
Yes, there you go.
Great. So how this next hour is going to work, friends, is we have a list of pre-submitted questions that a bunch of y'all wrote in advance, sent our way, and we've curated that list down. Those questions have become anonymous, so I don't know who wrote them. And I will go down that list. And if you have any questions that come up over the next hour, please feel free to utilize that chat feature like we mentioned before. DM me or Dr. Mary or in the public space, any and all of the above, and we will look forward to hearing from you as we chat. So let's chat and learn. So Mary, is there anything, or how would you like me to address you to? Dr. Mary, Mary?
Mary is fine.
Okay. Anything you'd want to touch on, maybe where you're a little bit of your career journey or where you're at today, some intentions for the hour, anything you'd like to share before we jump into questions?
Well, first of all, I'm just honored to be able to have this conversation just because I feel as if we're at a time, and I'm seeing this with leaders that I coach and organizations that I go into. They want to be more than just a one and done. And so
Yes.
organizations are trying to figure out, how do I show up as sustainable and as authentic as possible? And that's what Limitless is all about. How do I show up in my truth? And you said it, this is a safe space. But how do we create those safe spaces, whether we're at the grocery store, whether you're in the boardroom, or whether you're one-on-one with a client? Because the fact of the matter is that everybody is starting to develop language around their truth, and they're starting to figure out too that they don't have to besmirch one side of themselves in order to be accepted with another side. And so companies, organizations, nonprofits, schools are trying to figure out, how do we create spaces where people can really thrive, but we can still establish the business cause? So I'm excited about it, and really thinking about, how do we sort of innovate this space now by not over DE&Iing the workforce. So just excited to be able to engage and answer some questions today.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to hear, what do you mean? Can you elaborate a little bit on over DE&Iing? I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say that. Tell me more.
Yeah, so what we're seeing now is that we have several epidemics that are walking hand in hand with the very early stages of a post-pandemic society. So before we went into COVID, we had a mental health crisis. And now, with the CDC saying that working professionals are 54% more likely to experience depression, to experience anxiety, or potentially suicidal ideation, just from the constant stress and incubation of changing work expectations, changing family structures, relationships. All of that is coming back into the workforce, and people are asking the question, what do we do? Well, not just mental health, but we all saw play out the tragedy with George Floyd. And immediately after that, corporations, organizations, nonprofits, educational institutions said DE&I is now not just something that we have baked into our mission and vision. It is now at a priority goal. And we need to figure out, how do we have this conversation? How do we have it in a way that creates a safe culture? But also, how do we protect the employees that we have, augment their strengths, but also recognize that the differences are actually what makes us beautiful and diverse? And we can't just do it in 2020. We have to have some sustainable mile markers. We have to have some accountability for ourselves, because the world is watching. And then in 2021, we woke up with mental health and Black Lives Matter, and we had all these things happening on the international scene. And then over 40 million Americans have quit their jobs since April of 2021. So now organizations are also thinking about recruitment and retention. So this is a much larger conversation where it transcends race, it transcends gender, sexual orientation, background, culture, creed. And people are now saying, I want a workplace experience that values me. I want a workplace experience that respects my truth. And I want a workplace experience where I'm accepted, but also where I can learn some different things about people that I normally haven't had the opportunity to engage in. So this is a huge, huge wave that's coming through the workplace environment, schools, and even entrepreneurs as they're building companies. They're like, how do I build the most inclusive, equitable, and fair company that I possibly can, so that people want to come work for me? And so all of these schools of thought are coming together. And when we say over DE&Iing, what we're talking about is that it's in our faces. It's in social media. It's in marketing. It is everywhere. And so it's almost that proverbial eye roll when you hear your boss say, DE&I training next Monday, 2:00. People are that long sigh. You sometimes get the individuals that are like, not just another training. Because, Hunter, this is not about training. There is no program that is going to come in and make your organization equitable. There's no process or initiative that you can implement that's going to say, okay, now we are diverse, now we're equitable, now we're inclusive. So people are starting to figure out that this has to transcend training. This has to be an experience. It has to be a lifestyle. And we have to find ways where people are not just hit in the face at every turn, every staff meeting with more DE&I, and make it become something that's a part of our culture. And it's just the way we treat people as good human beings.
Yes. Live your dream, as it says right behind you. Okay, so you're going to help teach us how to do this today. And I think there's so much in there. It's so beautiful. Thank you. And so spot on about, we don't want to just be checking boxes, right? And this isn't just something that can happen overnight. It isn't something that's ever finished, honestly. And we have some great questions that are right on target here. So first out of the gate, someone said and asked, DE&I has come to the forefront of my company's attention, and they say that adopting a diverse and inclusive culture is part of the roadmap for the long term. What tips would you give that could help to implement DE&I with efficiency? So I love to hear, because this great question is about like, okay, this company is like taking it seriously now. And on the heels of what we were just saying, we don't want to just like play a tape or do a 45-minute class or whatever, how can they implement this with efficiency that means, it's successful to become part of the culture, like you were saying?
Absolutely. I say the first way to start, or the first place to start, you have to establish common leadership language. So start with the example that you gave at the beginning. You said this is a safe space. Well, I always encourage leaders, and along with their HR departments and key stakeholders throughout the organization, define safe. Bring people to the table that are going to help you when it comes to those big ideas of what does inclusivity look like in this organization? Not only what does it look like, what does it sound like, and what does it feel like for every level of the organization? So for instance, I heard a beautiful definition of inclusion the other day, and the individual said inclusion is where everyone is expected, reflected, and respected. And I'm working with a company right now that is taking that definition, and they're saying, this is what inclusion looks like at the C-suite level. This is what inclusion looks like at mid-level managers level. This is what it looks like for those employees who've just been onboarded. And then let's take it a step further. This is what inclusion looks like for our clients, for our administrative professionals, even for our custodial staff, because this organization said, when we say all means all. So I'm starting with inclusion, but you can even define psychological safety. What does it mean to be psychologically safe in a staff meeting? What does it mean to be psychologically safe in a strategy meeting with a client? And what does it look like to be safe, even if you're hybrid and you're not here in our office? All of these things matter. And then as you start to decide what that common language is, consider communication loops. It is not okay just for the C-suite to know what inclusivity, what implicit bias, what microaggressions and micro-invalidations are, and what they mean to the organization. You have to make sure that mid-level manager who's overseeing a team of 5 or maybe 50, that they understand. But also from the recruitment, from the hiring, the interviewing, the onboarding, do those individuals know that you have clearly defined and that this is what it looks like too? Because again, I talked about the Great Resignation. People are not signing up to be a part of organizations who don't have well-defined and well-implemented initiatives. The other big thing that I always say too is that, and this is one of my mottos that really guides how I lead, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. So organizations and leaders have to say, whose voice has not been represented historically in our department, in our team, in our company? We need to invite those voices to the table, because we do have employees who historically not been represented in DE&I, not in any initiatives, the decisions, nothing. You have to make sure that they have a seat at the table. And then the last piece, and I think this is where a lot of companies miss it, or a lot of leaders miss it, inspect what you expect. expect change in how you address certain groups, if you expect that individuals will have a singular protocol for addressing or reporting microaggressions, or if you experience bias, or if you want to introduce allyship, inspect what you expect. Bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, who is responsible for coming back to that initiative and saying, we moved the marker, but we didn't move it in the right direction, or we moved the marker, we're doing great, but based on our baseline, we could go further if we do this. And then as you inspect what you expect, are you giving the same amount of attention and energy and resources to your hybrid employees as you are to the ones in the office? Because
Mm.
the workforce now is split. So I think those four things: establishing some common language, consider every level of leader in the organization, consider your communication loop, and then inspect what you expect. What are your accountability measures and what are your accountability protocols after you implement?
Wow, there's so much good stuff in there. That is powerful, powerful. I was taking notes. I love that definition of inclusion. Did I get this right? Inclusion is where everyone is expected, reflected, and respected. Love that. So good. Inspect what you expect is so solid. And if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. Oof, that one gave me chills. That was so I was like, oh, that is so real and intense and true. So true.
And it is, we have these traditional models of leadership that they just don't speak to the employee of today. So
Mm,
everybody deserves a voice and you need it. And not only because of bottom lines, I'm not talking about bottom lines. I'm talking about treating people as human beings and not human doings. See them, have a way to celebrate them, have a way to lift them up. That's what coming to the table is all about.
I love that. Yeah, a friend of mine says when we're talking about showing up in life as well, it's like it doesn't matter what we're doing, it's how we're being.
There
You
you
know,
go.
another way
Yeah,
of same turn of coin, right? But it's just like, right, I could be doing lots of different things. I could be, talking to a client, I could be making a cup of coffee, I could be waiting in line. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing, it's how I'm being around these other people, right? And to myself.
absolutely. And I think people are starting to realize with this work-life balance that Hunter
Mm,
doesn't stop being a good person because he logs off of the chat and learn. He's going to be a good person because that's who he is at his core. And
mm.
so when I talk about professional development versus people development, how are you developing your people?
Well, thank you. I received that. That feels good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it takes practice. It takes practice. I think we're all inherently good. And
Yes,
it takes maintenance and practice and work and study and training and self reflection and all of these things, right?
all of it, all of it.
Yeah. Okay, so friends, we have about 40 minutes. So if you have any questions coming in live, I'm getting inspired. I hope you are too, and you're getting fired up. So feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and Mary and I will dig into those. So the next pre-submitted question we have here is, oh, this is so great. How can affinity groups help build DE&I in the workforce, and what are any pitfalls to avoid in building them?
Oh, yes. I love affinity groups because I think we get so focused on diversity that we forget that you still need time to understand and to connect with others who are like-minded or have like experiences. But I'm going to talk to you about the biggest pitfall and then kind of go into the types of affinity groups. The biggest pitfall with employee resource groups or any type of affinity groups is that they tend to be exclusive when we are trying to move toward more inclusivity. So anytime I have a corporation that says, okay, Dr. Hemphill, can you come in and kind of audit our DE&I practices or like what we're currently doing? I'm always looking for clauses, I'm looking for words, and I'm looking for language that opens up affinity groups rather than close off. I always suggest to leaders that leaders also attend at least once or twice throughout the quarter the different affinity groups, even if they don't identify with those affinity groups, because that's a way to educate. And when C-suite leaders, CEOs, solopreneurs model the way forward, you're giving people permission to say the doors aren't closed just because that's not how you identify. That's actually an opportunity to walk in and learn something different. So legally, I always suggest that HR groups and different leaders really work with their legal team to ensure that there's no discriminatory intent with any affinity group, because that is opening the door for exclusion. You don't want that. And then the second piece is really, really making sure that that process for the affinity group is formalized. A lot of times people say, okay, well, we want to start this affinity group for LGBTQIA, or perhaps we want to do a Muslim affinity group or any type of group based on the demographic that we serve. But without formalizing it, then really all you have is a gathering. That formalization process, give it a purpose. What is the purpose of this group? What is the opportunity that we have to stand up leaders within this group? So I always say, have an executive sponsor of every affinity group that's either from the DE&I Council or your executive leadership team. Affinity groups that have C-suite support or executive leader support are 50% more likely to evoke positive change and conversation within the organization. The other piece with formalizing it is to have an application process and or a charter for that group. Tie in the business goals, tie in the department goals. If your vision and mission says we are a global company that serves many different people with these services, well, you're actually formalizing the globalization of that affinity group by tying it into the company goal. And then the other piece is a lot of people don't define what the affinity is. Is it a diversity resource group? Is this a volunteer group for people to come together for new ideas? Is this an affinity group, which means it's not attached to my culture or my creed, but it's based on my likes, my dislikes, my mindsets, my traditions? Or is it a professional development group? Are you simply coming together because we're all engineers, or maybe we're all cosmetologists, or how are we coming together? So by limiting exclusion, making sure that you tie in your legal team, establishing that trust and formalizing the application process, and really making sure that people know it's not just for this group, it is open to all. You're not only moving that inclusivity forward, but you're also sort of navigating around any potential pitfalls that'll make that affinity group defunct and eventually fall apart.
So much good advice in there. So many good tips. It sounds like you've witnessed perhaps the success and failure of some groups, or
Yeah.
maybe less success we can
Yeah,
describe.
yeah, exactly. Yes. And it's sad because affinity groups start with the best of intentions,
Right.
right? You have like two people around the water cooler who have found a common interest, a commonality, something that connects them. But without support, without resources, a lot of companies don't even say, is there a budget to support this group? And without that support from C-suite or somebody in your council, then you really don't have that account. That member, inspect what you expect. It's that accountability that this is going to continue happening. We have the on-ramps and off-ramps for HR if we need it, for financial or fiscal opportunities if we need it. But if conflict does arise, we also have somebody who is moderating, facilitating, and elevating the right conversations so that this doesn't get into the weeds of our actual work.
Yeah. Wow. And it's, I think it's just it's so beautiful to remember that. I love the distinction there that you said about, well, if you don't have like a clear mission, it's just a gathering of people. And I love that because, like, well, we can hang out, like we can hang out, we both like this, or we both identify as that, but to have intention and to, like you said, something along the lines of, propping up leaders, and so like creating new leaders out of these groups.
Absolutely. And I say this all the time, that's people development. You may have leaders in your organization, you don't even know they're great at public speaking or, reading a room or moving different communication pieces. And then they get into the affinity group and you're like, you're shining. How can we use that to develop you as a great leader, not only in the department, but the entire company? So having that sponsor helps, because then that sponsor can be an advocate. Hey, did you know that Erin is absolutely fantastic at small group management? Then she gets assigned to a new project, and before you know it, she's promoted. So to be some intention behind affinity groups and not just gatherings of like minds. Formalize it, make it purposeful, make people better throughout that process.
Yes. And then if, as people are doing that, I think that hooks back into what you're saying about the retention, right? Because all these, I feel seen, I am valued, I've been growing. Of course, I want to stay here because there's room to grow in this company as opposed to like just being another cog, right?
Exactly. It's purposeful.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Purposeful. Okay, friends. So we're almost at the half-hour mark. So any questions? You got 30 more minutes to ask them. And I've been getting some DMs too. Thank you for your comments as well, for checking in, letting me know that you wrote some of these questions and thanking me. You're welcome. Thank you for writing them. So great to have you all here. Okay, friends. The next question I have here is, excuse me, some employees have said that they don't have enough time to get to know other people other than their teams. How can we help these people to be inclusive and communicate with others inside the company?
Oh, yes. So time is probably one of the most precious commodities that we have. But I will say this, what takes a good leader and makes them great is they learn how to use time as a stakeholder. So when people say, I don't have time to get to know other people, what they're really saying is, I'm not prioritizing getting to know other people or connecting other people. And rightfully so, sometimes people have jobs that have so many responsibilities. Oftentimes people are not really adept at really saying, this is what I have to accomplish this work week. And so maybe chunking or scheduling is really hard for them. So this is up to the leader or the leaders in the organization to find opportunities where it naturally would occur, but now people are increasing their awareness. Like, what do I mean by that? I always say increase a culture of frequent check-ins. What that could look like is you have a mid-level manager who says, hey, Dr. Mary, I don't have time to get to know other people. I've got observations. I've got to do feedback loops. This project is due. So one of the things I'll coach that leader on is doing frequent one-on-one check-ins with the team that they oversee. What that does is two things. It gives them an opportunity to establish that relationship, but it also, because it's frequent, because it's happening every single week or bi-weekly, then you're forced to really start to learn that other person because, again, you've attached a business goal. If I have to meet with you frequently about that project and you say something like, oh, well, my husband did this today, or my significant other, my partner did this together, I'm learning about you. And it's going to open up natural conversation because I know next week I'm going to have to meet with you. I'm not going to start the meeting off with, okay, well, let's dive right in. Hey, how's your significant other? How's your partner doing today? You're unconsciously learning to not only ebb and flow with the different people around you, but you're also establishing authentic relationships. The other thing I say is shake up the hiring and the interview process and introduce a mentor model. So when I have leaders who say they don't have time, what I'll do is make sure that again, we're going through the great resignation right now. One of the things that I encourage leaders to do, and I've seen work really well, is instead of just your executive leaders doing the hiring, or instead of just your HR doing the hiring, if you're hiring for a specific team or a specific group, ask two or three individuals from that team or that group if they want to volunteer to be a part of the hiring process. Then once they make it through the initial screening, invite those individuals to come up with questions. There's two things are going to happen. People are going to get a real sense of who they're working with, who's being onboarded, and ask the real questions that get into the weeds of the work. But those individuals who said they don't have time to get to know other people are going to feel the efficacy of building their own team. And they're inherently going to start asking you questions about look fors, about needs on the team. So they're going to have to get to know these candidates based on what's not on the paper. What are the questions? What are the pitfalls? What are the challenges this team has come against? And now you as a leader who don't have time, did you know that you can invest better in the hiring and onboarding process so that it negates some of these issues down the road? But by introducing a mentor model, you're going to increase retention. That leader who doesn't have time is now going to have a like-minded conversation and connections to other individuals, and they're actually making their team better. And there is a great book that I love, love, love. It is called Belonging at Work by Rhodes Perry. And the whole premise is individuals understanding how to be more inclusive in the work that they already do. And I love when leaders introduce it as a book study, but not as a traditional book study. You don't have to go chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. Find the chapters that speak to the needs in your organization and start a conversation. And don't have it round robin, like where Hunter reads chapter 1 and then I read chapter 2 and then Karen reads chapter 3. Let people speak from experience, because grounding and storytelling is how we move people in DE&I. It is not by saying, did you know there's 23 dimensions of unconscious bias? People don't want to hear that. People want to hear, hey, I had a really intense experience in that board meeting. Let me share it with you, and how somebody who I've never even worked with actually acted as an ally on my behalf. So you're helping people tell stories. You're helping them kind of take this piece of literature and just focus on what it is that they need, and then just talk about it. And don't have to do it at work. Go to a Starbucks, go to a Panera Bread, change the backdrop. People's tensions are going to go down because they're not at work. And those people who you've seen have said, I don't have time to do that, they actually get engaged because you didn't put so many mandates on what it is that they're learning.
That's really smart. And I love hearing about, switching up the scene, because it also, if you offer up some extra time potentially too for employees to do this, then there suddenly is time. And then they might be able to start to realize that, oh, there might be other places that there is time.
Exactly.
I'm going to have to check out that book, Belonging at Work by Rhodes Perry.
It's a great, great book.
I will. It's in my notes, added to my notes. And it makes me think of, as Oprah likes to say, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is time.
There you go. There you go. I love that quote.
Okay, friends. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And we are going to keep going down our list here. We have so many great questions. Probably a lot of y'all that are here on the call wrote these questions. So thank you. If you have other ones coming up, feel free. Okay. So next one up we have here is what mistakes have you seen in leadership language that have caused a negative impact, and what are ways to rebrand?
Yes. So I tell this story often. I was asked to consult with a leader in an organization, and this particular company was an international company with employees on 5 continents. This was immediately after the tragedy with George Floyd, and the CEO wanted to address the entire staff of about 5,000 individuals. And so the individual sent me the notes, and I started reading. The first sentence in her address was, I don't see color. Immediately, when I start to think about what was happening on the world scene and the conversation that was happening around DE&I, our first meeting, I talked with her about how that particular statement, I don't see color, it negates the continuum of experiences represented by not only people of color, but the perspectives of other employees who have had positive engagements with people of color. Also, that statement, it sort of renders the landscape of DE&I. When you say I don't see color, it renders it lifeless. It renders it bland, colorless. It has no definition. So the analogy that I used with her was, when I say I don't see color, think of a black and white TV with the static. You remember the rabbit ears? Now I'm telling my age. The rabbit ears, and you have to try to find a signal and you can't quite find it. But saying I see the world in technicolor, it adds a whole new dimension to the conversation when you're addressing or responding as a corporation to the vision and mission to be inclusive, to be equitable, to be fair, and to ensure that people are seen. Saying I see the world in Technicolor, it doesn't negate anybody's experiences, either based on the color of their skin or maybe sometimes backgrounds and those things that we cannot see and those attributes that make them who they are. So I always encourage leaders to remove the phrase, I don't see color. But then also there's the idea, and this is an age-old statement that we've said in DE&I for decades, is that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And this term originated like in the 80s. But here's my question. If diversity is being invited to the party, who is doing the inviting? Because Hunter, if I don't know you from a can of beans, if I'm not connected to you, I can't extend an invitation to a person that I'm not connected with.
Right.
And then what you're telling me is that in this organization, the only way that I can be inclusive and dance is if I'm at the party. But if I'm outside the organization staring into the window and never got an invite, my perspective, my skill set, my voice, anything that I can add to this organization to make it better, it's rendered defunct. So I offer to change that phrase. And there's a fantastic DE&I researcher in about 2019, 2020, who offered changing that phrase into diversity is going to the party and inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. Because if everybody in this organization can come to the party, but there have been key individuals who've been part of the party planning committee, that means that the music I like is going to be played. The foods that I have an affinity for are going to be served. The decorations are going to speak to me. But you translate that into signage, communication, collaboration, use of pronouns, making sure it's wheelchair accessible, understanding that people will identify differently and allow them to be able to share. That's being a part of the party planning committee. So I always say for leaders, take a really good hard look, not only at our own biases and anything that may be interfering with the work, but utilizing that leadership language and being very granular and specific. What do you mean when you say we're an inclusive work environment? What do you mean when you say that we're going to try to eradicate bias when it comes to females in engineering, or maybe, different cultures and different backgrounds and creeds being represented? And then last but not least, when we say training, workshop, seminar, people shut down because I can't think of one individual in the workforce right now that has not been just training down. You've gone to training for this, certifications for that. I have to go to this conference. Shift the language to say we're going to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion experience. Or we're going to have a speaker come in who serves as a catalyst. Because the best thing we can do for DE&I is not tell Hunter what to say, not tell Hunter that here's your privilege, not tell Hunter this is how you should address people. It's when Hunter experiences it or receives one thing that is a catalyst to get him to the next step of his journey, not the end, because Hunter's never going to be at the end. We're always learning. But what can be a catalyst to get him to a new mindset, a new perspective? So those are just some examples of leadership language that we can shift to just be more inclusive and equitable.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love the offering up of, refreshing this old phrase because it was dusty, a couple of them there. and really, because it's the mindfulness that you're speaking of that I'm really resonating with. If you're part of if inclusion is being part of the party planning committee, right? It means like every facet of it is looked at from all these different angles. Because, we were talking about there's biases and there's unconscious biases, and there's just, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So we need the diversity in the room and in the party planning committee to help us, know what we don't know so that we know to know it.
Exactly. And the thing is, that's another place where retention comes in, because you may have somebody who's just never had an opportunity to share. And by sharing, they're going to actually speak to the experiences of those who never had the opportunity. So you're actually increasing employee engagement by leaps and bounds by opening up that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I just got to give a shout out. I hope I don't embarrass you, but when you said, if I don't know you from a can of beans, that filled my heart with so much joy. I'm like, that is Southern charm that I am keeping with me for the rest of the day.
Oh, welcome.
That is such an endearing phrase. If I don't know you from a can of beans,
Beans.
I love it. I love it. Okay, friends. So we have about 20 minutes left, a little less. So keep those questions coming. Next up, oh, this is great. And we touched on a little bit of this. What is the difference between professional development and people development?
Yes. So professional development, and the best analogy I can give, are those things that are truly career and continued education when it comes to prolonging what it is that you do. It's the difference between a human being and human doing. Professional development are any of those certifications, any of those trainings, any of those core things that are going to make you more educated, more enlightened, and better adept at simply doing your job. Professional development often happens in a silo. What do I mean by that? If I'm a nurse, I am not going to go to professional development on aerospace dynamics. And if I'm in aerospace dynamics, I'm not going to attend professional development on cybersecurity. But people development is oftentimes referred to as employee development, and that is developing your people so that they are critical assets to any organization. So this is not just me sending you to professional development so that you can be a great security analyst. That people development or employee development is me sending you to training on how to be an empathetic listener, how to establish not self-care, but self-regulation in conflict. Because problems are not discriminatory. Nurses have problems, engineers have problems, social workers have problems. If I can be a great problem solver for you in your organization here, I'm probably going to be a great problem solver in this personal issue. I'm going to be a better problem solver and better listener when I'm out in the community. And that overall is going to make humankind better. And so a lot of the areas where you'll see professional development are skill-based, and they also have to be renewed. So sometimes there's an expiration date. A lot of teachers have to go to professional development every 2 to 5 to 10 years to keep their certification up. But there's no expiration date on employee development or people development when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to motivation, when it comes to social skills. And a lot of times when we talk about social skills, what we're talking about is what we once called soft skills: eye contact, teamwork, grit, perseverance. Now we're saying, okay, this is needed more than ever in the workplace. You have to know how to work with groups of people. You have to have an empathetic lens into the fact that your reality is not the only reality. And so how do you make space in a way that says people can be safe, people can speak about issues that matter to them, and that they're not going to be ostracized or treated differently after they share their truth? And a lot of times you'll see people development or employee development when it comes to authenticity and transparency, which again, there's no expiration date on how you can show up as your best self. So I love this because I say to leaders, people development gets people ready to lead in any role in your organization because they are all around becoming better at connecting with other people. Professional development is if you want to keep them in that seat. People development is if you want to keep them in the organization for life. And those are two totally different things.
Oh, that is so powerful. I love that. And I love the self-discovery doesn't have any expiration on it. That's so wonderful.
Right, exactly. And the fact of the matter is at the time we're living in history, I can't think of any organization that does it. I couldn't stand a tune-up, or if you're already doing it great, just more robust employee development. And those companies that do it well, they see such a decrease when it comes to conflict resolution that oftentimes sometimes can end up in HR. But also, the best marketing for any organization is internal. So then they know, when employees know, hey, this is not only a great place to work, salary, PTO, hybrid, work from home, but I get treated. I'm seen, I am lifted up as a human, and I'm treated with expectancy and grace and flexibility, but I also have the opportunity to elevate things that matter to me. And my boss doesn't treat me differently the next day. My coworkers are not giving me the side eye at the next meeting. That's the kind of marketing that people are attracted to now, because the world scene is playing out and people are realizing they don't have to choose. It doesn't have to be either or anymore. There's a company out there that will respect you, that will make sure you're safe, that will make sure your voice is heard.
Yeah. Oh man. And the also what you mentioned earlier about, some things end up in HR around conflict, and what you said earlier, which really jumped out for me, was as opposed to self-care, self-regulation during conflict. That is so important. And I think that also transfers again to what we were saying when we started here about how we do that in the workplace is also how we do that in our life, right? Because, if you're in a city and you're fortunate enough to have a car that you drive in, the road rage, that can be real. Someone takes your parking spot, whatever. It's like, how do I self-regulate during these moments? Because I can't be that person here and not over there, right?
There you go. It's consistency. And I did a workshop a couple years ago, and I was talking about self-care and self-regulation, self-awareness. And I was saying, it's the manicures, it's going to the barber shop, it's just feeding, and somebody said, well, Dr. Hemphill, self-care is just so that we don't look raggedy while we're walking around in the world. But self-regulation are those things that I do that bring me back to center. Like, where and when do I feel most present? How do I know I'm being triggered? And how do I not move on the polar end of anger or depression when somebody offends me? That's self-regulation. Because leaders, that they're going to stay the course. They're not going to let conversations or those types of things allow that to move them, to rock them. They know their center. And no manicure is going to help you know your center. No, you can have the best barber in the world. That's not going to help you be a good person who can move through conflict. So self-care is the surface. Self-regulation, self-awareness, that's employee development. If you have employees who are self-aware and know how to move out of conflict or know how to create space, wow, like you have teams that are going to be super effective.
Yeah. Are there skills, or I'm sure I know it varies from person to person, company to company, team to team. Are there some successes that you come to mind about these like self-regulation techniques under conflict?
Yeah, so there's this one team that I was working with at one point, and I'll say this: anything DE&I that you work with when it comes to people development, the person has to want it. They have to have an intrinsic motivation to say, I want to get better, or I want to add something to my toolbox. And this particular organization had a leader who was just berating employees. They could tell what type of day they were going to have by how he got out of his truck in the morning. Because if he came in and he had his cup of coffee and he said hi to the secretary, they knew it was going to be a good day. But if he didn't have his coffee and he came in and beeline to his office without speaking to everybody, some of the employees literally told me they hide in their office all day. This individual, I started working with him. I started working with other individuals on his team and sharing feedback about their experience with him. He had never heard it said in the way that I related, and in terms of protecting anonymity. But I just said, overarching, can I tell you some of the trend words I'm hearing? Scared, nervous, anxiety. Some of them are thinking about resigning. And I said, sir, when those types of things mulling around in people's mental, how can they focus on the work that is so critical to clients who are paying for products and services that require their best? He wrote me the nicest letter, and he said, thank you so much for holding a mirror up to my stuff. I know I have work to do, but I need your help in order to be able to do it. He now has one of the top organizations. He has a waiting list for individuals to come work for his organization. It took him 2 years, but he was able to start having necessary conversations, authentic change, not in the form of an apology, but in small micro wins with how he changed, how he communicated with people. And he had to do something really huge, is he had to own his stuff. So he went to several individuals who he had just completely almost demolished their self-esteem. And he said, I have gotten in the way of you being successful in this organization. Is there any way, is there anything that we can do so that we can start rebuilding? And I completely understand it'll take time. I need to let you know that I might fail. And I also need to let you know that this is important. You're important to this organization, so I'm willing to do it. And those employees were willing to work alongside him. And over the last 2 years, he has shifted the culture, but it's because he started with himself.
That is an amazing story. Oh my God. When you started talking about the email, I got a little teary-eyed. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a softie here. I was like, that is such an amazing dose of example of humility.
Yes.
To, like you, as you said, owning your stuff.
Yes.
And admitting and asking for help is
Right.
huge.
Right. And now, does it always happen? No. But really, when you start to hold that mirror up to people, at the core, you said at the core, all people are good. And you're going to have some leaders that are like, just like the excuses. I don't have time for it. That's just who I am. I had a leader one time say, if I'm nice to my employees, aliens will think that they'll think aliens took over my body. And I was like, that's interesting. We'll unpack
Yeah.
that later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is a mirror, right? Once you
Yeah.
see and how you affect people, it's a conscious decision to try to change.
Absolutely. And I love what you were saying too about they really have to want it. And there's this old phrase, it could be turned about several different things, and can use it in the context of this. It's not for people who need it, it's for people who want it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And if you want it, it's there. If not, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I can look at a company's retention rates. I can spend 5 minutes just walking down the hallway and I can tell you what kind of culture there is. Are people smiling? Are they leaning into one another? Or is it cold and obsolete and calculated? It matters to people. And people have just decided, I think, over the last 3 years that they're not going to sacrifice their mindset anymore when they can speak up, when there's resources out there, and when there's a process to be able to get better.
Yes, absolutely. Well, friends, we have just a few minutes left. So if you have any live questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. This is Dr. Mary's a well of amazing information here and resources and wisdom. So please utilize these vital moments, if not now, when, friends. So we have time for just a couple more questions. And yeah, I also love too what you were saying about the proof is in the pudding there, because you were talking about with companies generally the retention, and then with that story in specific, you were talking about how there's a wait list with that because this person really put in the work, admitted that they're going to make mistakes, and was an invitation to make amends with some of his employees. Yeah. And continue to work on the process. And like you said, it's like, this isn't just so that we can feel good. It actually does have, I mean, that is, we want to feel good and feel safe and included and inclusion and belonging at work. And then everyone can make more money too. And it can be better. It's like, well, there's also this, if you need the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we have time for just a couple more questions. And let's see. We have so many good ones here. I'm like, how do we want to end it out? Okay, this is good. Okay, so there's so many good ones here. We're not going to get to all of them, sadly. Someone asked, what advice would you give to teams that know the importance of DE&I inside the company, and they would like to maintain the amazing culture they already have? So there's a great team, it's like, it's a company, but they need some help and they need some advice here.
Yes. I had the awesome opportunity to work with 2 leaders at the local planetarium, and we offered up this conversation called Woke Has No Color. And the beautiful part about this conversation is that the president of the planetarium was a Caucasian white male who identified as cisgender heteronormative, and that the assistant director was a Black female who was really talking, had come from poverty, but they together talked about how the one thing that they did that has shifted what they've done in the planetarium, and they already were good. I mean, relations were wonderful. They had tons of individuals who wanted to volunteer, people who wanted to work there, but they knew that they were missing something and they couldn't put their finger on it. And they used, and this is, I share this with everybody when I talk about D&I, is the IDI development continuum. And that is the intercultural development continuum that says, and it's an assessment, they have not only their employees and their executive leaders, but also any interns and any volunteer stakeholders that come into the organization. Because this assessment lets you know whether your organization or company is in denial, if they are in polarization, if they are in minimization, acceptance, or full adaptation and ready to go with change. And what they found is that a lot of their organization was still in that denial polarization phase, where it's like, we see that this is happening on the outside of the world, but it's not an issue here in our company. It's not something that we need to have a conversation about, whether it's race, bias, anything of that nature. And then that polarization was happening when it came to, because see, here's the thing, we think polarization only happens with race. It was happening engineer to intern, engineer to office staff up to executive leader. There's so many relationships within an organization. You can't just define them and put them in one umbrella. But from that continuum, they were able to move their organization from denial and polarization all the way up to acceptance and adaptation within 4 years, because they stuck with the process. They consistently used the same language throughout the organization. And they were able to pinpoint, based on the planetarium's work, what denial looks like as an intern, what polarization looks like as an intern, what acceptance looks like as an intern. And they bake that into their training, onboarding, and hiring. It has changed the conversation. They now have one of the most diverse planetarium staffs and volunteer organizations in the country. And they're taking their message on the road to talk about how two leaders from two very different backgrounds, they were forced to really say, what can we do that's more deep and more meaningful than anything we've ever done? And it's going to start with the mindsets of everybody who's connected to this work.
Wow. What planetarium is this?
The Moorhead Planetarium at Chapel Hill.
In Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, I love that. It really does tie together everything we've been talking about, and it's so incredible. Unfortunately, we are out of time, Dr. Mary Hemphill. This has been so good. How can folks stay connected with you? Are you on LinkedIn? What's your website that we can check out? Any other resources that you'd like to share?
Absolutely. Please head over to our website, www.bealimitlessleader.com. You can see there all of the things that we offer in terms of coaching, consulting. We even have a few books and a mental health course if you're interested, as well as a new affirmation planner. And then you can go on LinkedIn at Dr. Mary Hemphill, Instagram at The Limitless Lady, and you can email me at info@thelimitlesslady for more information.
Amazing. Tell me a bit about this in this last moment, this affirmation planner. That really sounds exciting and cool.
Absolutely. So part of being limitless is speaking life to your life. All of the thoughts manifest, and you never go anywhere physically that you've already not been mentally. So our planner is a day-by-day planner, affirmation a day, but it also helps you not make a to-do list, a productivity list, as well as curate how much water intake, what you want to put in your ear grate. You can establish and curate your playlist for the day. It also has an opportunity for reflection, and you get to really track your mood. So is it a 5-star day? Is it a 1-star day? And what do I need to do to get myself back to center? So it's a 365-day planner that helps you speak life to your life.
Speak life to your life. I love also ear grate, keeping that one. Don't know you from a can of beans, ear crate. So good. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I want to honor everyone's time. We're 1 minute over, friends. So thank you so much, Dr. Mary Hemphill, for making the time today. Thank you for sharing space with us. It was such an honor to chat with
Oh,
you. Thank you. Thank you.
likewise, Hunter. I enjoyed you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Yes, thank you all for joining today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And, what affirmation can you keep what's yours today? Do you have one?
Oh, my one today is I am a rock star and nobody can tell me any different.
I'm going to borrow that one for the rest of the day, if that's okay with you.
Okay. Our rock star, Hunter.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one, rock stars.